So welcome to the very first edition of the Canada Talks Electric Cars webinar, brought to you by the Electric Vehicle Society. Our new webinar series will be produced monthly and will examine a broad range of EV-related topics from a Canadian perspective. My name is Tim Burrows. I'm a chapter lead at EV Society, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. Electric Vehicle Society is a national Canadian organization whose goal is to utilize the expertise of electric vehicle owners and enthusiasts to help Canadians transition to electric transportation through education and advocacy. If you're interested in learning more about EVs, we invite you to join us at one of our monthly chapter meetings, now held by a video conference. Thanks to this episode's sponsor, Kenneth McClure of YouTube's EV Revolution Show, a channel focused on the global market of electrified automotive transportation. The EV Revolution Show provides informative content, including news-style reporting segments, electric vehicle reviews, and coverage of many EV-focused events. Check out Ken's YouTube channel and subscribe today. So today's webinar is being recorded for later viewing, and you'll be able to do that at evsociety.ca. All guests have joined the webinar with microphones muted. You're invited to ask our guest speaker questions at any time using the webinar's Q&A function. One of our webinar team members, Laura Bryson, will read out your questions immediately following the presentation. The entire webinar will run for no longer than 60 minutes, and we will post any unanswered questions on evsociety.ca website. Today's webinar is entitled The Economics of Electrification, and we are thrilled to have with us Mr. Peter Hatges, Partner, National Sector Leader, Automotive KPMG in Canada. Peter is a Managing Director at KPMG Corporate Finance. He has extensive experience in mergers, acquisitions, and financing assignments for public and private companies. He also serves as KPMG in Canada National Automotive Sector Leader. He has worked on cross-border assignments in Europe and the United States. And he has provided advice to shareholders and boards in a broad range of situations. Peter is also a member of KPMG's Global Executive Steering Committee, where he participates in monitoring and implementing the firm's global mergers and acquisition strategy. Peter, it's now my pleasure to turn the microphone over to you.
Thank you, Tim, and welcome everyone. Good evening. Hopefully everybody can hear me. What I want to do today is cover sort of the current status of ZEV development, economics and considerations. I want to go through a picture of production volume. I think that's very near and dear to the industry and the situation that we're in, with the drawbacks that the current pandemic has posed, and sort of consumer sentiment. And then we'll wrap it up, and hopefully we'll have a good opportunity to answer some questions. So with that, let me kick it off. So when we talk about economic recovery, which is extremely important because it's going to impact automotive production for a very long time, at least the next 18 to 24 months, you have to look at the US market. It is one of the world's largest economies, a GDP of 21.4 trillion, and it will set the stage. Consumer markets are defined by how Americans purchase vehicles, their trends, the trends that they set, because the automotive market tends to cater to those trends. You cater to the biggest market and the other markets follow. And that's extremely important because they do lead and some ideas around credits being posed to ZEV manufacturers, and I'll explain that in more detail. You can expect that there's going to be a lot of pressure on tax incentives for electric vehicles. And quite frankly, I'm in total disagreement with issuing tax incentives or credit incentives to purchasers because it creates a significant imbalance in the market. It's not the way to promote zero emission vehicles by any means, and it creates a host of problems on a production front. So I want to talk about a little bit about what California does and how they do it and why it's such a very good idea. So They have zero emission regulations, and they mandate that clean vehicles, if you will, make up a certain percentage of total sales. Now, what they do is they calculate something called percentage credits. And a percentage credit is not necessarily allocated to one vehicle of production. A percentage credit is allocated to the distance or the range an electric vehicle can achieve with its current electrification power. So if you can produce a long range electric vehicle, you can get more than one theoretical credit per vehicle. And that is an excellent incentive. If you don't meet the targets, obviously there's penalties involved and they range, but it's a great incentive to get the manufacturer and to put pressure on the manufacturer to make vehicles that the market's going to want and, quite frankly, that the environment needs. So if you look at it, these percentage credits will go from 7% in 2019, arguably to about 22% 2025. So however they're calculated, 22% of percentage credits have to be earned in 2025. So what does that mean, though? It doesn't mean 22% of the cars will be electric. It means about, if all the projections are accurate, maybe 8% of all new vehicles will be ZEVs and plug-in hybrids. Not bad. And it's a great start. And for a variety of reasons, it's going to be extremely critical that that kind of incentive, that kind of legislation, that kind of regulation is adopted more broadly. I think it puts the impetus on the manufacturer. It takes the discrepancies caused by market differences when you apply credits between regions. And if you apply credits and you give consumers credits to buy vehicles, of course, we all know they don't always last. So this is an extremely good way to promote electrification. Now, let's keep going. What's happening in Canada? And let's talk about this. So 2025, Canada's target, if you look at Transport Canada's view, is 10% of vehicles being ZEV. KPMG had done an analysis, I had done an analysis earlier this year before the pandemic, and we were even more optimistic than that, only because production volumes and production changes as scheduled by the OEMs were suggesting they might even exceed that in North America based on announced platforms, the number of vehicles being converted to electric platforms. But much of this new platform development is underway. And let me give you an idea when I say, how much of it was underway and how much of this was earmarked. The big 6 manufacturers, being the 3 Americans, if you want to call them that, Ford, GM, Fiat Chrysler, and then Toyota, Honda, and Volkswagen, had a war chest of about $250 billion in cash on their balance sheet. That's right, $250 billion. Now, that, most people looking at that say, boy, they were really prepared for this pandemic. Of course, it wasn't for that. And it wasn't necessarily for a rainy day, but they had significant capital committed to undergo the transition into electric vehicle platforms. There's been many announced, some, the big 12 manufacturers, which include the others like a lot of the Germans, BMW, Daimler, etc., Audi, VW Audi, we're announcing that they might achieve up to 15 to 20% of their platforms in electric hybrid type vehicles by 2025. And when you look at the recent announcements, you can see that I wouldn't use the word abandon, and I don't think that the combustion engine is going anywhere soon, but VW is effectively ready to terminate its development of new gasoline engines after 2026. And quite frankly, those expenditures have begun to tail off even now. Daimler was scheduled to do this this year in 2020. Ford, of course, is building a big new plant in Normal, Illinois with Rivian. And the majority of GM's R&D dollars now are going to be in ZEV. So most of you are very familiar with the auto industry, but just to reinforce the point, platform development and platform life is generally somewhere between 4 and 7, maybe at the outset 8 years, but typically 4 to 5 years. That's a platform until it undergoes major change. So to prepare for that platform, That's generally done 4 years even before that. Ergo, 2020 compared to 2025, you can see that those changes in production facilities, dedicated resources have already begun to take place. And it's an encouraging thing. It's something that is happening and happening at reasonable speed. Now, let's see what's going on. So let's look at economics and considerations. What are the issues here when you look at electric vehicles? You know, electric vehicles, if you took a clean sheet of paper, you would say this is a really economic platform to build a car on. Like, it's theoretically cheaper. You use less workers, hours per vehicle, you know, and this is a UAW study, so I didn't do it, you know, could be reduced by about 40%. So hours per vehicle reduced by 40% for assembly. There's fewer components for sure. I think this is well understood. So the theoretical build cost is a lot cheaper. And, you know, depending on how you count moving parts, I've always struggled with this statistic, but I see it quoted everywhere. You know, 1% of the moving parts of an ICE driveline, you know, when you think about the implications of that, not only for assembly, but for maintenance and sustainability, it's got a pretty good forward picture. So what's the story? So the story is translating a platform into something consumers will buy is a costly endeavor. There are no economic order quantities that can make current electric vehicles as inexpensive as, say, even the current, although phased out, Volkswagen Beetle, which could be purchased for $24,000 or $23,000 if you wanted one, or Toyota Yaris, which have very efficient internal combustion engines, are produced en masse, produced cheaply. They don't have the range anxiety that some purchasers still have. And so the struggle at the OEM level is, do I convert my vehicles into an electric platform where I don't have consumer take-up? Now, I think what's happening, and the momentum is there, is that you never want to use the word force a product onto the market, but there will be a push because I think all of the OEMs know legislation and regulation is coming at them fast and furious, and they're going to prepare to make sure that they are, you know, dealing with legislation in the phase out of the combustion engine, which I think the combustion engine is going to be around for a long time. You know, the question is, how fast will it be phased out? But there's no doubt that if you look at the economics of zero emission vehicles, electric battery powered vehicle, it is theoretically cheaper to build. It is theoretically cheaper to maintain. So you say, gee, what a winner. Well, there's a lot of hurdles to get that over the line. And with the current pandemic and the economic interruption, this hurdle is going to take a lot longer. And make no mistake, we were on a webinar a few weeks ago with the APMA. There's a real serious push to get all the facilities open and running properly, but stockpiling vehicles is not going to help the industry at all. And what really needs to happen is that these vehicles need to be sold. Building them and parking them isn't going to help. So there's going to be a lot of incentive money that the OEMs are going to have to throw at consumers, you know, to make sure that they can get those vehicles off the lot. But we'll talk about that a little bit more. So that's generally the economics and considerations. Inexpensive to build, theoretically. Certainly the lithium-ion technology is there and seems to be the platform of choice, although fuel cell technology and hydrogen fuel cells have their benefits, particularly for long-range vehicles. But the train is moving, or was moving, in the right direction. Let's hope it keeps going. So, battery costs. This is the real issue. And, you know, there's a lot of big players in the market now. Battery technology is not confined just to vehicles. The transportation industry, like the transit industry, like buses, trucks, other vehicles are considering battery and the utilization of battery technology, simply because they're faced with the same emission concerns and qualifications that everybody else has. So, there's a lot of development that's going into this, and certainly, what it costs, again, in fact, impacts the average cost of vehicle. And again, when we get back to it, the real cost, the real impediment cost to the production of electronic vehicles is they don't sell at any great economic order quantity. It's very hard to retool a whole plant. Just ask Tesla. It's really hard to retool a whole plant to produce electric vehicles cheaply, unless you're producing them in the hundreds and hundreds of thousands, and you've done it before, and you've done it very, very well. Now, Tesla is, as a matter of fact, producing positive EBITDA for the first time in a long time, so they seem to have crossed the hurdle. And if you look at profitability of all of the OEMs, up until the pandemic, every single major OEM was profitable, and it exhibited positive EBITDA probably over the last 5 years. Stock price doesn't reflect it, except for Tesla, but certainly they've had a very profitable period. So getting back to, what's the trajectory here? Obviously, the Mac Institute has illustrated a significant decline between 2007 and 2019. That's expected to continue. If you get to $100 per kilowatt hour, you're going to be pretty economic. And big players in terms of production capacity exist. Various of these players serve the OEMs. And again, I don't think there's a lack of available capital that's going into the development of battery technology, because I think battery technology has broad application far beyond consumer vehicles. So you've got trucks, transit, and other applications. When you look at fuel cell technology, though, I think this is the big rub. And I think if you ask Toyota, they're unsure whether lithium-ion battery technology is going to really be the one-trick pony. Fuel cell technology has its benefit, uses hydrogen. It fills up in 10 minutes. For those of you who fill up a gasoline-powered car, it fills up in about 7 minutes. That's pretty fast. Charging an electric vehicle, even if you really charge it really fast, maybe 20 minutes. But in practicality, people charge it overnight or over a number of hours when they park it at home. So, those are the big differences. And when you look at something like long-haul transportation, fuel cell technology could be an extremely good option and a better option. And so, you're going to have a lot of opportunity, to use that technology in a more effective way. We'll see. And I think this is one of the big impediments as to the adoption of technology of zero emissions technology by certain OEMs. Some have made a commitment to lithium ion. I do think it's winning. Maybe it's the old beta VHS problem, but for those of you that know what that is. But it looks as though it's, a lithium-ion technology has won the bet so far. We'll see how that goes. So that's the summary on battery costs. Now let's flip over. Product mix. What's been happening? So the major OEMs have had phenomenal financial years in very, very strong successive financial years of positive EBITDA until this pandemic. The shift to trucks, pickup trucks and SUVs has been a very positive evolution for the industry. And in general, as we talked, very healthy cash resources. SUVs and pickup trucks have been profitable segments for the North American manufacturers. Ford, for instance, the F-150 sells somewhere between 900 and 950,000 units a year in North America for a pickup truck. That's a lot of units. So you can appreciate that, that draws a lot of attention. And if you look at passenger cars now, they're only 28% of US sales. And I'll tell you why this is important in a minute. So you look at this fall off and what's been happening in the year-over-year change Just look at 2018 to 2019. If I went back to 2016 or 2015, you'd see this trend accelerating where passenger cars are falling off the market in terms of annual sales. But 10% decline year over year and a 2% pickup in light trucks. Overall, 1% down, and the proportion of the numbers impact that. So what's going on? Well, there's low fuel costs. They've been extremely low, as many of you know right now. That helps the SUV and truck market. People aren't necessarily motivated towards electric vehicles. Electric vehicles have been focused on right now the passenger car, although Tesla does have an SUV type equivalent. And I think that when you look at what North America uses its cars for, it's trucks and SUVs. Trucks particularly, a lot of them are independent business people that have a lot of stop and go traffic. Again, range anxiety, the ability to charge a vehicle, charge it quickly, carry a big payload, have durability, be able to work in cold weather. All of those things are impacting the decision of consumers, very, very significantly. So they tend to lean toward the tried and true internal combustion engine. So here, so not only have we got this issue of, do we have economic order quantities and economies of scale, do we have consumer sentiment or purchasers, when they look at their buying habits, they look at what they're buying their vehicles for, how much stuff they're putting in them, what their payloads are, what they're towing with them, all the things that they're doing, and will they gravitate towards some kind of electric vehicle that's a truck? We'll see. That's got to be the next major economic hurdle for the electric vehicle market. It has to produce a vehicle that will appeal to the major market in North America. Because if you look at these numbers, light trucks, pickup trucks, and SUVs are the order of the day. And so they are going to have to become electrified in a way that the consumer will purchase them. And the changeover is a huge, massive opportunity cost. So think of it this way: massive profitability coming from light trucks and SUVs. Conversion to an electric vehicle too early might lead you with very poor or very soft sales if you haven't got all the economics right and all the attributes right: towing capacity, duration, operation in cold weather, all that good stuff. And now you can see what the impediment is at the OEM level, right up, right up to all the way to the top, and what they're thinking about. How will this change take place? How quickly can we make it take place? And how effectively are we going to make it take place? And I can tell you, this is the major consideration of all the OEMs. The bread and butter is the light trucks, pickups, SUVs. They work great with a combustion engine. Some of them are diesel, and now we got to make them electric. We can do it, and they can do it, but it's more of a workhorse than the average car. And the load requirements and everything that goes with it are different and more demanding. So that's a very key consideration. Conscious of time, I think we're doing pretty good, so hopefully we'll have good time for question and answers. So picture of production volume. What's happened now? What's going on? What does this mean for the electric vehicle market? So North American assembly plants were idled, and Asia was at 30 to 50% just a few weeks ago. On May 18th, North America has tried to open with some mixed success. The supply chain has followed suit, and all of you know and can appreciate that opening a factory like a modern automotive production vehicle that produces automotive production vehicles is a very difficult task. Shutting it down is kind of easy. Opening it up again and getting all the products into the factory on a timely basis and producing these things so that they all fit together is difficult. Like we said, the big six have decent short-term liquidity, and those of you who've been watching, Daimler raised about $1 billion recently, and most of the others, have had the liquidity. The real issue here, and again, this is another impediment to how do we get to producing electric vehicles and meeting the timelines and investing in dollars that will see, electrification come to the market on a timely basis. The major issue here, the major danger, is that the residual resale market in North America could collapse. What do I mean by that? Okay. Many vehicles are purchased on a financed basis. People don't buy vehicles with cash generally. And so when you look at the lease cycle for vehicles, if those residual values and used car prices start to decline or decline precipitously, what happens is the financing arms of each of the big manufacturers will run into liquidity issues. And when they run into liquidity issues, they have difficulty financing cars. When they have difficulty financing cars, car sales slow down dramatically and precipitously. For those of you who followed the industry and you remember the 2008 debt crisis, automotive sales fell by almost 40 to 50% in a lot of categories. And that's because vehicles could not be financed because of a lack of available credit, and subsequently GMAC and Chrysler Credit both filed for bankruptcy. This is a serious situation. I can't over stress how important it is for production volume to get back to normal, for consumer confidence to be such that vehicles are bought and sold on a normal basis. And if the US market, which is currently very slow, it does not recover quickly enough, there will be a severe implication that channels through to all the OEMs, because all the OEMs sell in the US market. You have to remember that North American sales are somewhere around 20 million units. We produce less than we sell because we import more vehicles. And a few years ago in Canada, we reached a peak of 2 million units sold in Canada for the first time in history. That was about 2017 or 18, forget the exact year. Having said that, what we're expecting now is a decline, and the decline could be as low as 13 to 14 million units. We'll see in North America. This is an extremely important number, and if that number is somewhere around less than 13 to 14 million units, you're going to have financial implications to the OEMs that will stall capital expenditures. I think it will stall the introduction of some zero emission vehicles for sure. The plant changeovers may be suspended as the OEMs look to produce the vehicles that make them the most money. And rest assured, right now, the decisions being made as they're coming off the production line and starting it up, where do we put our attention to? Which vehicles do we make that'll make us the most money in the medium term? Because the volume game isn't going to win, so they're going to have to do something, to sell vehicles that are required. Pickup trucks, as I understand in the used market, are doing pretty well, and people need pickups for work. They use them for a lot of different things, so they tend to be very strong sellers. And hopefully, the market will do what it needs to do. So production volume, as it relates to the health of the industry, is crucial. And as it relates to the introduction of zero emission vehicles, is very crucial, simply because it's going to take a considerable amount of capital to change over. And I think these plans will be delayed. So in KPMG's production of 13 million electric units by the Big 12 in 2025, that was our prediction about 6 months ago. I think that won't happen until about 2027 or 26, hopefully. But if model year production hits a big stall, you're going to see that stagger by one production year, one model year rather. So one model year could be as many as 4 years. So 2025 could turn out to 2029. That's how serious this is. So hopefully things are getting back to normal. Anyone who watched the Dow Jones Industrial Average today, that it's doing pretty good. So hopefully that will continue. All right. Now let's take a snapshot. I don't know how many of you follow this chart. Most people are surprised. Now this is production volume. This is vehicles produced, and I'll talk a little bit about the new Canadian-Mexico trade agreement, what that means for internal combustion engines, what it means for electric vehicles. Okay, so let's take a look at this chart. You probably, many of you maybe have seen it before, I don't know, but you have to realize that China is a huge market. And Japan's market, just think of those 9 million vehicles being produced, a lot of those vehicles find their way into Western Europe and North America. So you can see they're very reliant on a strong US market. So just to be clear, in the strongest market, you know, the US could see sales of about 17 million units, but they only produce 10. Just so everybody's clear. Okay, so if you look at the old NAFTA or Cuba, United States, Mexico, Canada, that is about 16 million, you know, units produced, 16.5 million in 2019. A robust year in North America is about 17 million units. Everybody's making good money. The plants in Canada are doing exceptionally well, and everybody's pretty happy. And just to understand how important manufacturing, automobile manufacturing is to the Canadian economy, because I don't think a lot of people fully appreciate this. Manufacturing production, so dollars of production monthly in Canada, are something like 56 billion a month. $56 billion a month. The auto industry, while not accurately measured, has a huge spin-off benefit to that industrial production average. And just to make the point further, if you look at GDP, manufacturing in Canada is second in terms of its importance, second. And when you include transportation and warehousing, it's clearly number one. So automotive production is crucial to the strength of the economy. Automotive well-being is very much dependent on consumer sentiment, and so it goes. So you can see here, there's big players all over, and you can also notice one thing. If you look at Southeast Asia, people that were perhaps less impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, I point you to South Korea. And for those of you who don't know, Kia is a big South Korean company, obviously, and Hyundai. You know, look at Spain and France, who are very much impacted by the pandemic, and hopefully they're over it. You can see that there's some crucial Western European countries that really need to get going. Otherwise, this chart looks very, very different a year or two from now, and seriously very different. So you can understand the importance of automotive production around the world and its impact on GDP. So that's where we are in terms of production. And I said 2020, well, look for about 20%, I think 20-25% decline. Certainly the first 2 months, these sales I think have been lost. Don't know whether they'll be recovered. I don't think so. Okay. Consumer sentiment. So, you know, you look at an electric vehicle, it's a big purchase. Vehicle is a big purchase. Probably very weary in the current environment. People are uncertain. Obviously, if you're in the hospitality industry, you know, your future is a little unclear in terms of your ability, you know, to earn the income you've been accustomed to. There are many internal combustion engine offerings that are at extremely favorable prices. Expect this to continue. They're going to push product. The OEMs will be pushing product in an extremely, in my opinion, a very extremely aggressive way in order to move that inventory off the floor. But consumer attitudes, and I want to talk about this as I come to the end here. Consumer attitudes towards electric vehicles are improving rapidly. And if you look at various studies, Vision Mobility is one, but they suggest that over 50% of the buyers would consider a zero emission vehicle. The biggest issue the OEMs face, again, is producing product, getting those economic order quantities, faced with consumers that purchase a product of this size, this nature, and this price, want to and need to see it, feel it, touch it, and drive it. And that means you got to make the commitment to produce it. And it's a huge commitment. You're talking billions of dollars of R&D and capital expenditures to convert production lines that will become irreversible. And once they become irreversible, the fortunes of those who do it right will be set, and the misfortunes of those who do it wrong will be set too. And it will be such that you're facing a very competitive market, the threat of losing market share, the threat of not recovering because you've had a whole model year that doesn't sell, it doesn't succeed, and those are very worrisome, very, very frightening perspectives. So you can see, hopefully, listeners today will understand what's going through the minds of OEMs as they look at the electric vehicle revolution. I personally think it's very exciting. I think that the battery technology is such that range anxiety is falling. I don't know that it's gone away. I think when you get to cold climates, heavy vehicles, you might think differently. But for the average car owner, I think we've entered into a period where we're transitioning. And if the vehicles were available on the showroom floor, I think there would be a better take-up. The real issue, as we all know, is where are the dollars going to be spent? I started this off by saying that California's got it right by making sales credits applicable to OEMs, such that they're incented to either make products that the government or local governments mandate them to make, and if they don't, they face a penalty. And then the rest of the dollars are better spent in infrastructure, as we all know. There's not that many gas stations across Canada, 12,000 maybe. Do we need more electric charging stations? Well, if the best we can do is 30 minutes or 40 minutes or 25 minutes, yeah, because it only takes 7 minutes to fill the tank up with gas. But still, at least it's not bad, and it's a step in the right direction. There's no doubt in my mind that legislation amongst major governments, federal and state and provincial, will push the agenda and are pushing the agenda, and consumer sentiment will slant towards purchasing vehicles that make sense for our environment and our economy. So it's there. What we face as hurdles now are the economics of getting that to production. So I talked a little bit about batteries, and will fuel cells emerge as the the choice for OEMs? I don't see it. It looks to me like substantial dollars are being spent in lithium-ion technology, although hydrogen fuel cells, are easy to fill up once you get them working. And can you get that technology applicable? It has a different durability. It's interesting, but for now, it looks that lithium-ion batteries are winning the day for now. The biggest issue yet is that the OEMs aren't prepared to satisfy the model choices consumers are accustomed to. When you look at the, and this is a huge problem. When you look at the internal combustion engine, you have so many choices that you can fill the needs of every consumer. Can't do that with electric vehicles now, so electric vehicle purchasers have to compromise their purchase requirements. Not always the best way to make a sale, and you got to understand, again, like we've said, these are big sales that are financed with a lot of money, so people want what they want. Cars are an extension of a buyer's personality and needs. The showrooms definitely need to demonstrate that products are available, and then the order times have to be more consistent with the internal combustion engine. So you can see all the things that the OEMs are facing to bring this product to the market. And I do think that 2025, 2026 initially was the pivotal year and the right choice, where the OEMs would take a segment of their product dedicated to electrification and make the product choices available. That model would work. Other models will fail. So That's where we are. And now I'll wrap up, and I guess maybe I'll hand it over to Laura.
Perhaps, Laura, you're on the line?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, just before we pass things over for the Q&A to Laura, I just wanted to make a comment that obviously KPMG has its views about fuel cells and the transition that we're seeing towards electrification. But to be clear, we as EV society are all supportive of battery electric, and I think the vast majority of us are all gung-ho on battery tech as being the solution. KPMG is bringing some of what they view as reality checks, and we need to be open to those thoughts. With that in mind, I am going to let Laura deal with some of the questions. There are an awful lot of questions. I know we won't get through them all, but Laura, could you take us through some, please?
Sure, thanks, Tim. With 200 participants on, there is obviously no shortage and diversity of questions. So we'll start in order of the questions that were upvoted. So from Adam Q, Peter mentions the US market being the most important. China has mandates that are driving their EV adoption, as well as the EU's carbon reduction requirements that drive EV adoption. And there are more cars outside the US than inside. So why should we focus on the USA and not at policy globally?
Well, I think that's a good point. I don't think you can ignore the Asian market or the Chinese market. So I didn't mean to exclude it. But what I will say is that the US buyers tend to be trendsetters. They are well-heeled when it comes to buying expensive vehicles. You look at the average price and average vehicles that are sold here. There's a whole variety. And I think if it's not the biggest market, it is one of the biggest markets, certainly, to be included. So again, I think it's crucial because I think many OEMs cater towards that US market consumer, and I think they do set a trend.
Awesome. So we're going to move on to Raymond Lurie. Given that Quebec and BC are already at about 10% ZEV market share, do you think the federal government should have a more ambitious target for 2025?
Yes. First of all, I think that the federal government should be establishing all the targets, because that'll give it a nice, a consistent approach amongst the provinces and within the country. Secondly, while they might set this target, I think right now they're facing some impediments because of the market. But I would like to see that. I would like to see growth in that, and I would like to see dedicated expenditure towards infrastructure, promoting that, because I think that goes lockstep with that target. And I think if they announce the two in tandem, I think it will be very effective.
From Matthew Eglin, and I've seen a lot of questions come through here about hydrogen. So we'll start with this one. How can hydrogen compete with BEVs? The complexity and production costs are not comparable, and fuel is more expensive than gas.
No, I agree with that. But I mean, you would have said that 5 years ago about, and I am not an engineer or a scientist. So, you would have said that about lithium ion batteries and a host of other propulsion systems. Who knows? If you talk to the executives from Toyota and the emphasis that they put on hydrogen fuel cells and for their application. And again, I think I don't see one replacing the other. I think that's extremely important. I think even some of the OEMs will tell you that. They see the application being different for different modes of transportation. I think the passenger car is quite well suited to the lithium ion type battery. But hydrogen, for a variety of reasons, there seems to be quite an emphasis on longer range, long haul truck applications. At least if you talk to the OEMs, that's what they're thinking.
This is a question from Ralph Torrey about EV batteries as energy storage. The energy stored in the EV batteries will be enormous, and most of it is surplus on any given day. What can be done to ensure that the value will represent that The value of this will represent the new grid is captured and the vehicle to grid infrastructure is in place to support this.
So I'm assuming they're talking about capacity storage and how the grid will respond to that. It's interesting. I was on a panel with someone from Ontario Hydro who said this was going to be no problem and a great development for off-peak usage. I mean, you'd like to believe that if, and again, this is how California has structured its credit system. You'd like to believe that if batteries have a longer range, which means they last longer, which means they store more energy, you get more credits, you're rewarded as a manufacturer, and probably going to be rewarded by the consumer as well. You know, what's the response? What can be used? I don't know. I mean, that it remains to be seen. But what I will tell you is the biggest thing, the biggest development, the biggest implication of that is that you will win the consumer over by taking out not just range anxiety, but really making it economic, because you get away from the costly replenishment of fuel, gasoline, which has fallen in price, but still expensive. And I think that's going to be a big seller.
From George, can you please speak to the cost for a manufacturer to transition legacy business to EV, phase out of legacy componentry, servicing parts reduction, etc.?
Yeah. So if you look at the changeover, the new EV platform is far more efficient, and if they are producing as many EVs now as they produce ICE vehicles, right, you would have almost a 40% reduction in labor, a massive reduction in component parts. Theoretically, the car is a lot cheaper, call it 30 to 40% just through its assembly. Never mind how much the battery technology might save you or might cost you, who knows? That transition, though, is costing, to set up a plant, and again, it depends on the production, you're talking billions of dollars, billions of capital expenditures in terms of plant refurbishment, changing the supply chain, engineering the product so that it, meets all the, crash test requirements and the durability and survivability requirements. There's a lot of money that goes into the R&D, development, supply chain, product conversion. The legacy components are a big consideration. If you think about it this way. The average car park in the United States, Canada, has a life of 11 years. So the average car is 11 years old. That means we got some at 20, some at 1. So that means we're going to have, if you're going to service those cars and meet the requirements of your consumers, you're going to have a big storage bank of component parts for internal combustion engines that are going to last maybe 15 to 20 years, some longer, and there's always aftermarket parts, so don't forget that. It's a huge cost. And I think the legacy costs are going to be borne into the cost of electric vehicles. So when we talk about the absolute theoretical build cost of an electric vehicle, it looks cheap. The hours are down, etc. On the side, you're going to have the legacy costs to service the existing fleet and satisfy your customers. That's going to creep in to the ultimate cost of the electric vehicle. It has to. And so that's why you're not going to see a direct correlation. A 40% reduction in the price of an electric vehicle, that won't happen. And it's going to be absorbing some of those costs.
All right, we're at a question from David about charging infrastructure. I and many other consumers live in a building that don't have charger facilities in the parking lots.
Yeah.
Which available chargers facilitate central management by building managers?
So say that again, Laura, sorry, which?
David's asking which available chargers facilitate central management by building managers.
Well, this is a very big issue. So let's talk about this practically. Let's talk about it from a Toronto perspective. Much of the dwellings, like high-rise condominium facilities, have underground parking. Underground parking is expensive to begin with. It's expensive to get infrastructure, electric and charging infrastructure down there. Cost a lot of money. And you know what? That is going to have to be borne by tenants. That is another impediment, a big impediment to, electrification of vehicles. How do they get around it? Now, some of those, all of these buildings are eventually going to have to accommodate this kind of charging. How fast can it happen? What kind of charging facilities do you need? Superchargers or, 9-hour, 8-hour, 6-hour chargers. I suspect if you're going to install superchargers in a big building down there, it's going to be very expensive and not practical, not be done. So I think the purchaser of an electric powered vehicle in the near term is going to be faced with longer charging times in places where if the condominium association, as an example, gets together and commits the capital to putting in, the necessary infrastructure. That's a decision that, collectively has to be made by the owners collectively. I think it will. I haven't seen a lot of it yet, but we'll see. But definitely, underground parking is an expensive retrofit for electrification. It's expensive retrofit too for people who live on streets with no driveways. Right? There's a lot like that in Toronto. It's a real issue. I don't propose to have the solution to all those yet.
Peter, just to add to that too, I would point David and other people on this call to groups like Plug and Drive or Plug in BC that will list some of the different options out there for doing infrastructure management.
Yep.
Question from Mark Kerr. And I think this is going to have to be our last question, unfortunately, just because of time. But what we'll try to do is gather these questions up and get some responses out in an email.
Sure.
So from Mark Kerr, I've been watching the Fully Charged YouTube show from the UK, and I'm disheartened to see just how far behind we are in North America regarding renewable energy and EV adoption. The UK has far more EV models available across all price points. How can we improve our selection of makes models here in Canada?
So Canada is a difficult situation because many of the decisions that are made that affect the US Canadian market are made overseas. Now, the biggest producers in Canada are Honda and Toyota, and they produce some award-winning vehicles like the Civic and the Corolla. What I think you're going to see is as they push to electrification, we are going to have a lot more choices. Consumers are going to have to make it well understood. And I think the OEMs know this. I do think the OEMs know this, that consumers are being put off by the fact that they don't see the vehicles in the showroom. They can't see them. They can't get them. The order times are low. We talked about all that. I really do think they're alert to this. I think you're going to have to push hard and make it known, and the OEMs are going to have to understand that the Canadian buying public is ready to buy electric. The only way you can do that is to push for it very hard. I think it's coming. I think we got some big plans coming. Like I said, I'm hopeful that 2025, 2026, 2027 we'll see a breakthrough.
Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you. It was a very interesting conversation. I'm sure you generated a little bit of controversy among the battery electric loving members, but it's an important discussion to have. And to keep that discussion going, what I'd like to suggest to everyone listening is that when they have a moment, jump over to the evsociety.ca website and look for the section on forums. We've started a forum where you can continue a discussion with others about today's webinar and the topic, and that can keep the conversation going for a little while. But thank you, Peter. I think you really do provide an interesting sort of overview of the landscape, and that'll make a great launching platform for our webinars going forward.
Well, great. Thanks for having me. Thank you.
I'd also like to thank EVS members Kenneth McClure, Jason Arno, Anise Sharifi, and Laura, of course, Laura Bryson, along with the entire EVS team for their help in setting this up. We plan to hold future Canada Talks electric car webinars on the first Tuesday of each month, beginning on July 7th. Be sure and watch for a notification about our next webinar, and we'll be featuring a deep dive into another important aspect of Canada's transition to electric mobility. It looks like we have available to speak to us next time Suzanne Goldberg. If you don't know, she's the Director Public Policy for ChargePoint, and she will bring a very interesting presentation to us. Whether we realize it or not, each of us is playing a role in Canada's move to electrification. Our sincere hope at EV Society is that today's webinar was a small help in that regard. So until next time, stay healthy, and thank you for spending this time with us.